Hello everyone, welcome to Psych, and I apologize for the delay between my last video and this one. As some of you may know, my desktop broke down and I had to order a new one online, and it took about 2 weeks to get here. So in the meantime though, I asked you all in a community post if there's any topics that you'd like to see discussed in the upcoming videos. And today I chose to do a video on ISTPs, and that comes at the suggestion of Luna Gamer and WIC. Now ISTPs are actually a type that I haven't really talked about much on this channel, and that's what I want to do today. Let's get into it. This video is actually going to be a continuation of the archetype series, where we discuss how certain archetypes in history and fiction relate to the 16 personality types. And I actually couldn't decide between these two archetypes for the ISTP personality type, so that's why I decided to include both of them in this video. The archetypes that I chose for the ISTP were the engineer and the antihero. Now, the antihero is something that you're going to see a lot more in fiction compared to reality, but I think this is something that you can actually see in real life with the ISTP as well. So why did I choose these two archetypes, despite the fact that they are very seemingly different from each other? Well, it's because that I think introverted thinking in the ISTP is something that doesn't have to be focused on something intellectual or even in the realm of understanding in the same way that you might find with an INTP or an ENTP. It's because introverted thinking is a function that is commonly associated with wanting to understand the world. But in the terms of an ISTP who is more grounded in reality via extroverted sensing, I think that this can come along in more practical ways, and they almost relate to the idea of the rebel archetype as well, where they're going to back themselves behind their ideals in almost an introverted feeling type way, but they do it in a more logical, rational approach. This tends to lead to a personality type that is going to be very willing to stand up against things that they believe aren't true. And that's not something you're likely to see as much in the INTP, who tends to be a little bit more on the reserved and relaxed side. Before I go over the antihero archetype and how it relates to the ISTP, I want to talk about the engineer archetype. This is the one that I think relates more to the ISTP from a theoretical standpoint compared to how we might actually see them in a more realistic sense. And why is this? Well, ISTPs lead with introverted thinking, a cognitive function that is interested in understanding. They have secondary extroverted sensing, which means they're going to be more interested in interacting with the actual world compared to the world of abstract concepts. This leads to a type that, when you pair these two functions together, is going to want to interact with and understand the actual physical world. And in my opinion, this brings up the idea of someone like an engineer, someone who's going to be experimenting with actual things in the physical world. Or maybe even a physicist, someone who wants to understand how the physical world interacts with other parts of itself. When discussing these types of characters in fictions, there's a tendency to refer to how they might take apart something and put it back together at a young age because they want to understand how it works. Say they take apart a pocket watch and they look at all the gears and they see how all the gears interact with each other, and then they put it back together. In my opinion, this is a representation of the ISTP in kind of its purest form. Introverted thinking and extroverted sensing, a real desire to understand how the physical world works. And this differs from, say, an INTP who's interested in understanding how the abstract concepts work. You might even see INTPs in something like astrophysics, where they can't actually see the thing that they're studying, but they want to understand how it works. Or you might see an ISTP in actual physics, trying to understand how something might move when interacting with another actual thing in the world. The primary difference here, again, is that ISTPs prefer interacting with the actual physical world. And this is because extroverted sensing leads them to want to have that hands-on experience. If they can't experience it in reality, if it's something that someone's just telling them is true, they haven't experienced it themselves, it's going to be hard for ISTPs to really take this into their introverted thinking, for them to really solidify this as a fact in their mind. So ISTPs really build up this internal framework of ideas by going out into the world and experimenting with things. And this isn't something that you're likely to see with INTPs, who are kind of comfortable with just thinking about how things might play out, experimenting with abstract ideas in their head. And if they make sense from that abstract standpoint, the INTP might be willing to internalize it into introverted thinking. This isn't going to be the case with ISTPs, who really need that hands-on experience if they're going to truly understand the thing that they're trying to understand. Now let's talk about how the ISTP relates to the antihero archetype. This isn't an archetype that you'd likely associate with the ISTP from a more theoretical standpoint, but I think if you really look at the core value of ISTPs, you can really see how this plays out. So what exactly is an antihero? Well, an antihero is usually somebody who has semi-good intentions, but they don't display the characteristics of your traditional hero. And I think that the purest example of this that I can think of in terms of famous media is someone along the lines of maybe either Wolverine or Han Solo. And I think of both of these characters as anti-heroes because they genuinely want good in terms of what they're doing, but they're not always going to have the most moral approach to doing good, and they might even care about their own interests above the good at times. And in my opinion, this is really what characterizes the ISTP and even the anti-hero archetype at times. What's interesting about both the characters that I just mentioned is that most people online type them both as ISTPs, and I would actually agree with this. I think both Han Solo and Wolverine are great examples of the anti-hero archetype as well as the ISTP personality type. So let's look at Han Solo a little bit more in depth. So what makes Han Solo an ISTP? Well, he's someone who's interested in his own pursuits, and he's very interactive and adaptive. And in my opinion, this is what ISTPs tend to be. They tend to be very in the moment, despite not leading with extroverted sensing. Their understanding of the world comes through their interaction with the actual world, instead of searching for it like a lot of other types might, like INTPs or ENTPs might. ENTPs and INTPs are going to be the types who are actively searching for that understanding, where ISTPs and maybe even ESTPs are the types who are going to go out and interact with the world and gain understanding from that interaction. I like to think of the combination of introverted thinking and extroverted sensing as somebody who has a lot of street smarts, somebody who's kind of able to understand and interact the real world in a more practical sense. Where if you threw an INTP out into the streets, they're probably not going to do as well as somebody like an ISTP who can approach things in that more realistic sense. They're going to have, again, those street smarts, and that's something that you see a lot of in characters like Han Solo and Wolverine. Their entire character is built around the idea that they have a lot of real-world experience. They have a lot of street smarts. They're not going to be easily fooled by people because they've experienced these kind of tricks before. And that's really the greatest strength, in my opinion, of ISTPs, is their adaptability and their ability to understand actual situations and scenarios. These types of street smarts can also be maybe seen as extroverted sensing outweighing introverted intuition. SE dominant types and even SE secondary types can also be types who are really good at understanding things in the practical world on a very subconscious level. And this is because they have that introverted intuition, specifically even secondary extroverted sensing types, because introverted intuition isn't repressed. They have introverted intuition, but it's just on the lower side of their function stack. It's not going to be something that's as heavily weighted in their personality and their understanding of the world. So they gain real-world experience. They go out and understand things through interaction, and then they boil down these experiences to subconscious perceptions and maybe even patterns of recognition. So they're going to be able to recognize these things, but not even consciously recognize how they recognize these things. And that's going to be what really makes up the SE-NI axis, in my opinion, specifically in types like ISTPs who have that higher function stack SE. They're going to just go out and interact with things and then boil down those experiences into kind of concepts. One of the reasons ISTPs fit well with the anti-hero archetype is also because of their repressed function. Because they are introverted thinking dominant types, it also means that they have repressed extroverted feeling. And what that means is that sometimes they're going to be easily able to ignore the feelings and emotions of others. They're going to be able to pursue their own interests at the expense of others' feelings. Now, again, though, this is going to be something that you might see change with the anti-hero, and I think that this is why many anti-hero characters start out as villains and then become anti-heroes. Because you see them evolve, and as they grow into their repressed extroverted feeling, as they start to value this thing that's unconscious in them, they change from being someone who's purely selfish to someone who has this subtle understanding and acceptance of the feelings of others. You can see a great representation of this kind of hero's journey when you look at Han Solo. And I'm no Star Wars expert, so if I get a few details wrong, feel free to correct me down in the comment section below. But Han Solo is someone who starts out as a smuggler. He's somebody who starts out pursuing his own interests in life, just trying to get by, trying to get money, just trying to live his life. The understanding part of his personality isn't focused on actually understanding things in that intellectual way. He's more so interested in his own specific individual pursuits and understanding those things related to him. But as he kind of grows and as he matures, he gets caught up in these things that are related to more extroverted feeling type things, the betterment of the galaxy for everyone. And you see that he steps up into these roles, steps up into these leadership roles even when placed into them, because he deep down kind of truly values these things. And I think that this is a great representation of somebody who is an anti-hero really growing into their true potential, finding that value for the repressed extroverted feeling, for the values of everybody. Alright everybody, I hope you've enjoyed this discussion on the ISTP personality type and how it relates to the engineer archetype as well as the anti-hero archetype. In my opinion, ISTPs are one of those personality types that don't get discussed as much in the MBTI community, but they also have a lot of interesting personality characteristics. I mean, look again at characters like Wolverine and Han Solo. Both of them are very widely popular in fiction, yet they are not talked about much in terms of personality or those kind of characteristics. So I think it's really interesting to kind of discuss these personality types that have a lot of undervalued aspects to them. I would like to remind everybody that I do have personality typing sessions available at my website, asurapsych.com, if you're interested in learning what your personality type is and what that means for you. This has been Asura at Asura Psych. Have a good one.